to Daily Power Parsha. It's great to have you here. Today is Wednesday, March 10th, 2021. It's quite the party, my friends. It is quite the party, in as much as we are nearing in our one-year anniversary of DPP, as Donna pointed out. So lots of things to talk about. I'm going to open up I'm going to share the window, the browser window.
I have a question.
Yes.
Is our second year going to be the advanced level?
Maybe as we enter year two, we'll go a little bit deeper with that.
I mean, I feel it's already advanced,
It's already advanced, but you know what? If advanced can always be more advanced, why not? Okay, let me try to share my screen with you. All right, and then we can jump right in. This should work. I'm hoping. Yeah, can you guys see that, Vayakhel-Pekudei?
Yes.
All right, beautiful. All right, so let's explore. I'm sorry. 1 second. Hold on, everybody. Okay, do you see that now? Is it coming up?
Yes.
Okay, here we go. Vayakhel-Pekudei, Exodus chapter 37, verse 17. And we talk about the conversation about the discussion of the Mishkan. We gave some insights yesterday, but let's jump into the menorah. And this is Betzalel again, he made the menorah pure gold of hammered work. He made the menorah, its base, its stem, its goblets, its knobs, its flowers were all one piece with it. As we explained a few weeks ago, the menorah was to be made out of one solid piece with an integrity to it, a solid piece of gold. 6 branches coming out of its sides, 3 menorah branches from the one side, and 3 menorah branches from its second side. 3 decorated goblets on one branch, a knob and a flower, and 3 decorated goblets on one branch, a knob and a flower. So for the 6 branches that come out of the menorah. Again, all these details about the branches and the knobs and the flowers and all that stuff. All of those details we talked about a few weeks ago. Here is where it actually gets constructed. Here is the manufacturing of said items. So we had the vision, and now we have the implementation. I spoke at the end of yesterday's session about the difference sometimes between vision and implementation, and how one might think that the vision is where it's at, the implementation is flawed, but yet God loves the implementation, even if it's not always 100%. Let's continue. And on the stem of the menorah were 4 decorated goblets, its knobs and its flowers, and a knob under the 2 branches from it, and a knob under the 2 branches from it, and a knob under the 2 branches from it. So for the 6 branches that come out of it, what that means, as I said a few weeks ago, is when you have the stems that are coming out of the center, when you have the branches coming out of the center stem, so at the point where they meet, underneath that were these so-called knobs. Their knobs and their branches, once again, were all one piece with it. It was all of it was one hammered mass of pure gold. And he made its lamps 7 lamps in total, and its tongs and its scoops of pure gold. He made it of a talent of pure gold. Talent is a measurement, and all its implements. It had to have been a very large amount of gold because the menorah was quite high and hammered out of one piece. That means you have to really start with a very large piece and then work from there. Donna.
It said the goblets, so is that like our modern day Kiddush cup?
So let me see where the goblets come, where the goblets are mentioned. Yeah. So it's interesting. These goblets I don't believe they were mentioned before in the Torah's description of the vision for the Mishkan. I believe it was used. There was a different phrase that was used. No, I'm sorry. It was cups. The word was translated there as cups. I don't know if it was goblets. I think it was cups, but it's the same thing. Remember, I showed you the image of the Maimonides menorah with the cups upside down.
Oh.
And I share with you the Rebbe's explanation that the idea is to share and to give and not to just hold, but to really give to others. So is that the source? I understand your question. Is that the source of the Kiddush cup? I don't think so, but there is certainly a cup type of icon. I don't know if the icon is the right word, but there's a cup design certainly that's used here, and that will play a role later on in history. Was there a need for a Kiddush cup in the temple service? I don't believe so, but it was a part of the Jewish ritual otherwise. Here we have this kind of synthesis of these two images or two types of works in the same space. Okay, let's get back to the rest of the discussion. All right, let's talk about the incense altar. That is the inner golden altar. And he made the incense altar out of acacia wood, 1 cubit long and 1 cubit wide, square, and 2 cubits high. Its horns were one piece with it. At the corner, there were protrusions. At the corners, it went up. And he overlaid this wooden acacia incense altar with pure gold on its top, its walls, all around, and its horns. And he made for it a golden crown all around. And he made 2 golden rings for it underneath its crown on its 2 corners, on its 2 sides, as holders for the poles with which to carry it. Remember, this was the portable sanctuary. As such, everything had to have some handles and poles with which to carry. All right, let's continue. He made the poles as well out of acacia wood and overlaid them with gold. And he made the holy anointing oil and the pure incense after the art of the perfumer. So we've talked about a lot of the stuff, a lot of the items we've covered. Now, again, I just want to show you Rashi, right? I've toggled Rashi on. Do you notice something?
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing. No Rashis on this entire reading. That may be a first in the entire Torah thus far, where you would have a whole section, a daily reading of Torah with 0 commentary from Rashi, right? If I toggle it on or off, nothing actually changes. But let's jump into the 4th reading, which is today's reading. Remember, Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, today is Wednesday, day 4, reading 4. This is the reading. Now we're going to have Rashi here. See, we're going to have Rashi is like, all right, listen, I'm back. I'm better than ever. So Rashi's back. But what's also intriguing about this, let me pull this up 1 second. Yeah, is that once we hit verse 21, which is going to be right in the middle of this reading, that is the beginning of the next portion, the second of the 2 Torah portions. These are the numbers of the Mishkan. That verse 21 begins, Vayakhel-Pekudei Mishkan. That's the second of the 2 portions. Whenever we combine portions, it's usually done. My understanding is it's always done in the 4th reading, which makes sense. It's the middle, right? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So 3 on each side. And the middle reading is the 4th reading, right? Wednesday is the 4th reading. So the 4th reading bridges the 2 portions together. Half of the first portion and half of the second. Not half of the portion, but the first half of the 4th reading is from the one, and the second half is from the other. So let's begin the 4th reading. We'll see how far we get. And again, it's just recounting what was built. And once again, Bezalel, he made the altar for the burnt offerings. That's the outer copper altar, right? 2 altars, incense, inner golden altar, outer copper animal altar. So he made the altar for the burnt offerings of acacia wood, 5 cubits long, 5 cubits wide. It was a square. The altar was square and 3 cubits high. And he made its horns on its 4 corners, once again, protrusions at the corners. Its horns were all one piece from it and overlaid with copper. And he made all the implements of the altar, the pots, the shovels, the sprinkling basins, and the flesh hooks, the fire pans. He made all its implements of copper. By the way, it's interesting that you have all of the other items, whether it's the ark or the showbread table or the menorah or the inner altar, they're all made with gold. Everything inside the tabernacle building, remember the tabernacle building, that building with the covering? Anything inside the building was gold, either pure gold or wood with gold overlay. Anything outside was copper. The outer altar, copper. The wash basin where the priests wash their hands and feet, copper. So we have like the inner, sacred items made out of the highest form of material, the most precious, and then the outer stuff made of copper. I think there's also some significance, perhaps, to the idea that the outer altar is where people sought atonement. And when you seek atonement, you may not want to mention gold. You with me? Because it might be like, oh, that's right, I forgot about the golden calf. About that. Remember, God said that whenever something comes up, he is reserving the right to recall also the golden calf. I knew it. Remember the golden calf? Now again, right? So we may want to avoid gold when bringing the atonement offerings on the outer altar. Remember, the inner spaces were not about atonement necessarily. The menorah wasn't about atonement. The showbread table and the incense altar was about a more spiritual experience. It was the outer altar where you brought the animal that represents the inner animal. That's where atonement happens. That's where this transformation happens. And maybe it makes sense not to mention gold, by the way, or to evoke gold, and that's why it's made with copper. There's also, along those lines, on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, when the high priest, I'll just stop sharing so I can see all of you so nicely. When the high priest would do his service of Yom Kippur, on Yom Kippur, because he did other things in Yom Kippur as well, but when he did the Yom Kippur service, he did not wear the 8 garments, because those 8 garments included gold thread. And he did not want to evoke the golden calf in any way. Therefore, he changed into clothing that was pure white linen clothing. This becomes the source of the tradition that many have to wear white on Yom Kippur, even though it was only the high priest that did it back in ancient times. But you know what? It was such a good look. He looks great. The high priest could pull off white linen even in September. I know it's not exactly what you would think about September fashion. Nonetheless, he was able to pull it off. Mark, welcome to the party. It's good to have you here.
Hi.
All right.
Silver. I'm sorry,
yes.
silver. What was made of silver in the?
Only the sockets. Remember, the silver sockets that went under the boards that constituted the frame or the wall of the tabernacle. So there were silver sockets that were the foundation. Silver is the foundation. There's a lot to talk about because Kabbalah says that silver, kesef, is related to the word nichsof, nichsafti, which means a yearning, a love. This is a theme that we've been talking about in our Thursday night Tanya classes about love that's likened to silver, specifically silver. So gold is symbolic of something else, even a higher form of love that's not about you, it's about you dissolving, which is a different level. Silver is a desire to attach. So not to lose one's identity, but to maintain one's identity, but be attached in a very deep way with something else or someone else. In the spiritual context, it would be with God. So it's therefore no surprise that the silver sockets, which again, on an energy level, represent an attachment love, were the sockets in which the boards were attached to the ground, right? The sockets were literally silver, heavy silver bases with a hole inside, and the boards had pegs on the bottom, and the pegs went into the holes, and that's where it attached, and the stability was. So again, a lot of deep themes here. Number 1, attachment. Number 2, love being the foundation of our relationship, our mishkan, our temple for God, right? A lot of things, a lot of themes over here. Nonetheless, silver was definitely used in the Mishkan's construction. And when we get into the second of our 2 portions, as I mentioned a few days ago, that's the audit. That's where all of the donations were accounted for. And the Torah tells us exactly what was done with those donations. So we'll see exactly what was done with the sockets. Oh, I have to tell you this. Our sages tell us, and it's going to come up, but I'll just tell you now because we're talking about it, that when Moses was doing the audit, he panicked about the silver. He could not remember what he did with the silver. until he remembered, it's the sockets. Remember, if the sockets, I don't know that it was built yet, but you might forget about something like that because it's not some of the flashier items. It's just the foundation. It was an above ground foundation, certainly, because they were traveling with it, but not the most, it's all the way in the bottom. It's a very utilitarian thing. Nonetheless, he was quickly reminded of it and breathed a sigh of relief. But we'll go through that as we get closer. All right, I'm going to share my screen once again. Let's go back inside. Yeah, Mark.
Question. In Tanya, we studied what a gold relationship was, a dissolving relationship. The silver is an intimate relationship. What is copper?
What is copper? So copper is not discussed in the forms of love. My understanding, again, just based on the Mishkan conversations, that copper represents a sense of I'm not necessarily in a great place. I need to get to a better place. Kind of copper is that modality of tshuva, return, which is different than attachment. Attachment, which is the silver, is coming from, I think, a place of I'm okay. It's not from a desperation. It's like I'm okay, but I love you. I want to connect with you. I want that closeness. Gold is I don't want closeness. I don't want to be. I want to dissolve in the infinite to the point that there's no me left. So it's not me wanting connection. It's me wishing to cease to be, which is whether that's good or not good is another conversation, but that's a higher form. Copper, though, I would say is, at least symbolically, in the symbology of the Mishkan, it's the note, and I love that word symbology. I thanks to Rabbi Crisp for using that a lot. The symbology of the Mishkan, it's the notion of sublimating the animal, right? Offering the inner animal to get back on track. So it's not like, oh, I love you, let's get close. It's more of like, I need to get my act together, which makes sense, at least on a precious metal level, copper, silver, then gold. And it's not, nothing wrong with the copper. You need the copper. You need the copper altar. You need to, a human being needs to correct and recorrect. But that's seemingly what it would be, even though I don't believe Tanya gets into that on that level. All right, let's get, I don't know why this keeps on not working for me, but we're going to figure this out. All right. Let me share again. Let's hope this works. Is the Vayakhel-Pekudei coming up or something else coming up when I'm sharing?
Now we don't see any sharing.
No, a moment ago. Did anything share or no?
I don't think so.
Okay. We're going to make this work. I'm confident.
Yes.
Can you guys see that now?
Yes.
Beautiful. All right, let's jump back into verse number 4. And he made for the altar a copper grating of netting work beneath its ledge from below until its middle. A nice little design over there, like a netting design, like a crossweave. And he cast 4, but made out of copper. And he cast 4 rings on the 4 ends of the copper grating holders for the poles. And he made the poles of acacia wood, and he overlaid them, again, outer altar, animal altar, sublimation of animal, with copper. And he inserted the poles into the rings on the sides of the altar with which to carry it. He made it hollow out of board. So again, the altar, this altar was hollow, not the poles, but the altar itself was a box that was hollow on the inside. I think I mentioned even last time that they put earth. Ultimately, when they were in the Temple Mount, they put earth from the Temple Mount into that space so that it says that a person's atonement comes from the place of their origin. So the human being is said, Adam is said to come from the earth. So our atonement is kind of like arrives when we get back to that place, kind of that humility or that origin place, or almost like a regeneration of self, right? Think about like new beginnings, new starts. Kind of want to just start again from the beginning. From the beginning, Yeah. From the beginning? Sure. What does that mean? Earth. Done. So the altar, I mean, not literally a person's, not physically or biologically, but on a conceptual level, there's earth by the altar, and it's kind of like, or filling the altar is the earth, is earth. So it's kind of like being atoned from that space of birth and the notion of rebirth. By the way, why is earth connected to birth? Not for us, but for Adam. Again, Adam's creation was from the earth. Let's continue with verse number 8. And he made the washstand. That's also outside the temple building. It was made of copper and its base of copper, and from the mirrors of the women who had set up the legions. That's what I said before. I think I mentioned this a few weeks ago. It was made, the copper was the mirrors of the Jewish women who had set up the legions. That means that because of those mirrors, there were more Jewish kids born, because that's how the women would encourage their husbands to procreate. And these were who congregated at the entrance of the tent of meeting. Who congregated at the tent? I guess the kids would gather at the entrance of the tent of meeting. In other words, these were the generations of the kids from the women that was assisted by the mirrors. And he made the courtyard. I believe there's probably a big Rashi on 8, if I had to guess.
Yeah, there is.
Yeah. All right, here. Israelite women owned mirrors, which they would look at when they adorned themselves. Even these they did not hold back from bringing as a contribution toward the Mishkan. But Moses initially rejected them because he thought they were for temptation, right? It's vanity. Mirrors are all about looks and appearance. It's not a holy thing, he thought. But God said to him, accept them, for these are more precious to me than anything. Look at that. God said, are you kidding me, Moses? This is the best donation, because through them, the women set up many legions, i.e. through the children they gave birth to in Egypt. When their husbands were weary from back-breaking, I mentioned this a few weeks ago. When their husbands were weary from back-breaking labor, the women, would go and bring them food and drink and give them to eat. Then they would take the mirrors, and each one would see herself with her husband in the mirror, and she would seduce him with words, saying, I am more beautiful than you. And in this way, they aroused their husband's desire and would copulate with them, conceiving, giving birth there, as it says, under the apple tree I aroused you. Anyway, either way, the bottom line is that the copper mirrors were a very, very beautiful gift and very dear to God, and it's a really powerful lesson. All right, let's continue. Yeah,
you didn't get to the punchline. Go one more sentence, Rosh, or 2 more sentences.
I closed it already. What do we got?
It says, under the apple tree I aroused you. The key or the washstand was made of them, because it is meant to make peace between man and wife. Give drink from the water in it to one whose husband warned her against secluding herself with another man.
Perfect. So what Mark has mentioned, good. Thank you for mentioning that. Basically, the Torah talks about a case where a husband is being suspicious of his wife. And there's a process by which her innocence can be proven. And that would vindicate her, especially when you think about, look, Torah does a lot to take away from the power, if you will, that men historically had and even still have. Like, for example, the whole ketubah, the marriage document, is completely to protect the wife in the arrangement of marriage, which is unheard of. And so many things are all about protecting the wife in a relationship. So here we have essentially the story, the situation of the sota, which sometimes is about the focus is on the suspected adulteress, but really the whole point of sota is the vindication, right? For an unwarranted accusation. If the husband is suspicious and it's unwarranted, so she drinks from the water, there's a special formula that's made, a special potion, if you will, that's taken from the waters of the kiyar, but that vindicates. And once she's vindicated, then indeed the husband can, it's a sign from God that she's innocent. The husband is happy. Everyone's happy, and that's it. And there can be peace once again within the family. So the idea that the copper is the source of the kiyar wash basin, which is where the waters came for this vindication process, that's what Rashi's saying. That's the connection of it. All right, it's all about peace. Let's continue verse 9. He made the courtyard on the southern side, and there were hangings for the courtyard of twisted fine linen, 100 cubits, and their pillars were 20, and their sockets 20 of copper. The hooks of the pillars and their bands of silver. By the way, the silver was also used for hooks. All right, next. And for the northern end, 100 cubits, their pillars 20, their sockets 20 of copper, the hooks of the pillars and their bands of silver. And for the western side, hangings 50 cubits, their pillars 10 and their sockets 10, the hooks of the pillars and their bands of silver. And for the eastern end, 50 cubits. The hanging on the shoulder were 15 cubits, their pillars 3 and their sockets 3. And on the second shoulder on either side of the gate of the courtyard, there were hangings of 15 cubits, their pillars 3 and their sockets 3. All the hangings of the courtyard all around were of twisted fine linen, and all the sockets for the pillars were copper. You're probably wondering, we said silver sockets before. There were different pillars. There were the pillars, the sockets for the pillars of the tabernacle building, that covered building, and then the outer courtyard. So now we're talking about the outer courtyard stuff that was of copper. Again, it seems like the color scheme or the metal, I'm just going to go symbology, metallurgy or metallology or something like that, of the outside courtyard was a copper motif, the feng shui was all about copper out there, with a little silver, little silver action here as well. The sockets of the pillars were copper, the hooks of the pillars and their bands were silver, and the overlay of their tops was silver. They were banded with silver, all the pillars of the courtyard. The screen of the gate of the courtyard was the work of an embroiderer made of blue, purple, and crimson wool, and twisted fine linen, 20 cubits long, and its height and the width was 5 cubits, corresponding to the hangings of the courtyard. And their pillars were 4, and their sockets 4 of copper, their hooks silver, and their overlay of their tops and their bands were silver. And all the pegs of the Mishkan, and all the courtyard, and of the courtyard all around were copper. Those are the pegs that held the walls and the curtains in place. These are the numbers. So that's it. That's how Vayakhel concludes, the first of the two. Pekudei begins right now. That's Pekudei in Hebrew. Pekudei is right here. Eila Pekudei, these are the numbers of the Mishkan. This is the audit, the numbers, the count of the Mishkan of the testimony, in case you're wondering which Mishkan we're talking about, which were counted at Moses' command. Moses commanded the audit himself. Moses said, we're going to be transparent. Everything that came in, we're going to have a report, what every donation was used for. It says that there's different opinions. Some say that Moshe did this unilaterally, just to be above board and above suspicion. Some say that there were people that suspected him and said, Moses, how do we know that you're not profiting with all the materials that came in, and they were all supposed to be brought to Moses? How do we know that you're not siphoning some off and becoming wealthy in the process? So whether it was of his own initiation or in response to either loud or even quiet accusations or suspicions, either way, Moses is the one that says, let's do this. Let's do the audit. And this was the work of the Levites under the direction of Itamar, the son of Aaron the Kohen. So he's the one who did, Itamar is the one who did the audit, who helped oversee the audit. Let's see Rashi. Nope, I don't see it here. Let me see, hold on. All right, it must be in another text, the Talmudic text, the Midrashic text, not cited by Rashi, that essentially, according to one tradition, there were people who suspected Moses, and therefore Moses, he said, that's it, we're going to do an audit. which, by the way, tells us a lesson. Maybe this is a powerful life lesson in and of itself. According to either opinion, whether he did it of his own initiation or it was in response to some suspicion, either way, it represents a lesson that we can take for ourselves. Number one, always be above board, even if no one's asking. Transparency is always good. If you wait till someone asks, it might already be too late. Transparency is always the best way. Plus, and this is really important also, if you're transparent, right, about this type of stuff, then you're helping someone avoid their own sin. What sin? Of falsely accusing someone else, right? So why be opaque and allow for there to be the evoking of suspicion, and then have somebody be nichshal, have somebody stumble in the act of falsely suspecting Moses in this case, and then demonstrate the innocence, but in the meantime, somebody was culpable of suspicion. So why? It's kind of like it says, don't put a stumbling block in front of somebody who's blind, which we understand to mean that don't set someone else up to make a mistake, whatever mistake that is. So be transparent. That way, no one will be suspicious. And forget you, it'll help them avoid that thing. And according to the second opinion, that there was suspicion about Moses, and that's why he commanded the audit. Well, we certainly don't have the first lesson for the second understanding, but we do have another lesson. And that is, Moses could have said, how dare you accuse me? How dare you suspect me? Do you know who I am? I'm Moses, right? Moses could have defended himself by striking back and essentially saying, I don't have to show my books. I don't have to do that. I'm Moses. God spoke to me. I took you out of Egypt. I did all these things. I'm not showing anything. And yet he had the humility to say, people want to see the books. I'm going to show them the books. It's a powerful lesson as well. So again, number one, we should do our best to be above board, transparent, and no reason that anybody else should be suspicious of our stuff, whatever that is, whether it's financial or otherwise. Number two, even if we know we're innocent and we catch ourselves being indignant, how dare you ask? Somebody asked, have the humility to demonstrate that. Let's continue verse 22. But Salel, son of Uri, son of Hur, of the tribe of Judah, had made all that the Lord had commanded Moses. With him, his trusty sidekick was Oholiab, son of Achisamach, of the tribe of Dan, a craftsman and a master weaver, an embroiderer in blue, purple, and crimson wool, and in linen. So this is the person, Itamar, Aaron's son, is the one who's doing the audit, who handled all the materials so the people brought the materials to Moses. Who did Moses give them to make the stuff? Bezalel, Oholiab, and of course, all of the other volunteers, thousands of people that helped make the Mishkan. And now we get the audit. All of the gold that had been used for the work and all the work of the holy, the gold of the waving, we said waving is a euphemism for like an offering, was 29 talents of gold. 730 shekel, according to the holy shekel. Oh, so 29 talents and 730 shekel. Can I tell you exactly what weight that is in ounces? I can't. The menorah itself was made of 1 talent of gold. Remember, the menorah was 1 talent. This is 29 talents plus 730 shekel. That's a lot of gold. Straight up a lot of gold. What about the silver? Next, 25. The silver of the community numbers was 100 talents and 1,775 shekels according to the holy shekel. 1 beka per head, that is a half a shekel according to the holy shekel, for each one who goes through the counting from 20 years old and up, for 603,550 people. Those were the males, head of households, between 20 and 60 of the Jewish people. 603,550, 603,550. That's the number of half shekels that came in from the contributions. 100 talents of silver. So let's now audit it. What did it go toward? 100 talents of the silver were used for casting the sockets of the holy and the sockets of the dividing curtain. Remember, that's the sockets of the temple, of the tabernacle building. 100 sockets out of 100 talents, each 1 talent for each socket. That's a lot of silver per socket, if you ask me. Is what it is. It must have been a very heavy base. And out of the 1,775 shekels, by the way, it's 1,770. Oh, I'm sorry, 1,775. 1,775 shekels. What did he use? So what were the additional? So what was the additional silver used for? So the 100 talents of silver was used for the sockets. What about the 1,775 shekels of silver? He made the hooks for the pillars and he covered their tops and banded them, as we discussed just a moment ago in this read. What about copper? The copper of the waving, the offering, was 70 talents and 2,400 shekels. From that, he made the sockets of the entrance to the tent of the meeting. The copper altar, the copper grating upon it, and all the implements of the altar. So what was copper used for? Here you go. The outer sockets, the outer altar, the grating upon the altar, and the implements. And the sockets of the courtyard all around, and the sockets of the gates of the courtyard, all the pegs of the Mishkan and all the pegs of the courtyard all around, all of these were made from the copper. Now, let's do one more verse and we'll close it out. And out of the blue, purple, and crimson wool, they made the meshwork garments to serve in the holy, and they made Aaron's holy garments as the Lord had commanded Moses. So they made all the stuff, and we even have a teaser about them making the garments as well. All right, that takes us to the end. We just did 2 readings. We did 3 and 4. So that takes us to the end of today's conversation. Again, I think I'll just focus on that one insight, or those 2 insights about Moses and the audit. Number 1, don't do anything in a way that might allow one to be suspicious, even if they're wrong, because that's setting them up. That's not cool. That's number 1. Message number 2, even if you're innocent, and even if you think that the people accusing, are the ones that are wrong, especially when it's a public funds in a public facing situation, have the humility to just put all the cards on the table and say, here's the paperwork, here's the trail, here are my books, just so that there's no suspicion. The Rebbe speaks about this, the commentators speak about this. A guy like Moses would have been totally justified to say, how dare you accuse me? Y'all are going to get punished, right? Not cool. Not cool what you're doing. You're out. But that's if he was operating by ego. That's if it was about him. But it wasn't about him. It was never about him. It was about the truth. What is it? Truth, justice in the American way. Truth, justice in the Jewish way. It was about the truth. And he was humble, the most humble person on the face of the earth. So if that's the case, so then what's the problem? Show the books. No big deal. Oftentimes we get stuck and things become fights when the ego gets in the way. Why should I do that? I mean, can you do it? Sure. So why not? Why should I? Why should I have to do that? That's ego. That's an ego line, right? So we're encouraged to let go of the ego and just do what's needed. By the way, even when Korach, later on in the book of Numbers, when Korach, Moses' cousin, starts throwing all these complaints and accusations against Moses, first thing Moses does, he bows down to the ground and says, please don't do this. Like let's reconcile. When it comes to a place of no reconciliation, all right, the earth opens up and does its thing. But the first approach is, what do you need me to do to resolve this? I didn't create the issue. You're creating the issue. That's a non-issue. But I'm ready to do what it takes to resolve it. That's what humility is. May we all learn from Moses, a man who either wanted to preempt suspicion or responded to suspicion, unfounded suspicion, in a humble way. May we all have the humility to do what's right, even when we feel like we don't need to. Donna, go ahead.
So the other point about not setting someone up, that makes me think of a very controversial strategy in the American justice system of entrapment, basically setting someone up to commit a crime when they may not have done it on their own.
It's a major problem. It's a major problem. In criminal justice reform, that's one of the areas in which is being focused on because of the absolute corruption in that space. And it's a very slippery, listen, I'm not a conspiracy theorist, but it's a very thin line between setting someone up or providing them an opportunity versus encouraging them versus putting pressure on versus and planting evidence and or coercing confessions. I mean, it's all these types of tactics that are used and that are legal, except for planting evidence. But a lot of these are used, and we know this to be the case because it's come out. It's the truth has come out. You can even see, and I've seen interrogations where entrapment techniques are being used. Kind of like, we have the evidence that you did it, right? Like, we have the evidence. If you confess, we're going to give you this set of consequences. If you don't, if you make us pull out the evidence and go through that process, well then, death penalty, let's say, in a capital case. And people have confessed to crimes that they've never committed because they felt like the world was closing in on them and the potential was so much worse. And they signed their name on a confession document to a crime they never committed. How do we know this? Not just because people said, I was forced into it, because how do you know? DNA and other solid, substantial evidence that has come out. Anyway, why do I mention that? Because you mentioned the idea of entrapment, right? Setting someone else up to fail, which is not right. It's putting a stumbling block in front of somebody. We're supposed to clear the path, not put stumbling blocks. On a moral level, we want to help people avoid mistakes, not to encourage them to make mistakes and then catch them. I mean, think about a system that becomes so warped that a goal, I'm not going to say the goal, but a goal at some point in that system is to set people up, to do the wrong thing, and then to catch them and to punish them for it. I mean, how twisted of a system is that it should ever get to that point, right? It should always be about preventative measures to keep people on a good path. I mean, that's a complete distortion, and thanks for mentioning that, because it's literally the opposite value of lifnei iver lo sitem mikshal. In front of a blind person, don't put a stumbling block. Here, you're literally putting a stumbling block. And yeah, I know the justification. Well, we suspect that they would do it, or they are doing it, or whatever it is. The goal should be to help someone avoid the trouble. Anyway, a lot more to talk about. The Rebbe was very active in this space, which we explored in the course that we did a few years ago, the JLI course, Crime and Consequence. The Rebbe was very active in criminal justice reform. In fact, the first step bill that was passed about a year and a half ago, or maybe 2 years ago now. I think it's called First Step or First Act. I forget what it was called. Was driven a lot by Chabad and by other Jews that feel strongly about criminal justice reform as a societal need. It's bipartisan. It's not political. It's human beings. It's human, and it's right. And it's anyway. A lot more to talk about. Not for right now, but thanks for mentioning that connection as well. All right, it's good to see everybody. Sandrine, you look like you're almost by Chabad with the building over there. I don't know if that's Chabad, but it looks like a Chabad-style building.
I'm also way south from the Beltline.
Okay, I'm just saying, like, brick and glass, we're just going to call it Chabad at this point. If anything has brick and glass, we're just going to say, oh, that's straight up Chabad.
I can be there in 15 minutes.
You see that? It literally, it looks familiar. Anyway,
No,
all right,
it's
good.
so
Good
nice
to
now.
It's beautiful. It looks
With
beautiful.
the belt line, soon it will go all the way.
Yeah,
But
very
thank
soon.
you.
We're putting. Oh, guys, let me ask you a question. Let me take a temperature of this room. This is a good sampling, I think. As some of you may know, and I mentioned this, I think, the last day or two, I'm planning on an outdoor Shabbat dinner in April, about a week and a half or 2 weeks after Passover. The date is the 16th of April. It'll be beautiful. Shabbat under the stars, delicious catered dinner, outdoors, the lights, whatever, beautiful. Question is like this. You know what? Let me, I can stop the recording. No, we don't need to record this part of it. All right, let me just get the recorder off.